I've seen many videos over the past, I'd say, year and a half about AI is the Antichrist, that AI is the end of the world, and that AI is going to spell the doom of mankind. And so I've actually gone back and forth on this. I've gone back and forth. And it has taken me a while to work through this because at the same time that, like everybody else, I'm working through what AI really means for society, means for careers, and what AI actually represents in terms of, is it good for society? Is it bad for society in terms of, okay, do we offshore our brain to AI, right? And let AI do everything for us? Or do we double down and say, okay, no AI at all, and we're going to just go totally 100% human? And at the same time I was doing that, I was also working through spiritual process, both the trials and tribulations of trying to understand what is the spiritual path, right? What is the spiritual path? And you can be on a spiritual path and still working through some of the finer aspects of that path. So I've seen numerous videos recently where AI is the Antichrist and it is a false god. And a prominent fear is that AI could embody or usher in an Antichrist figure, either in the form of a synthetic human being or the AI as a computer network works to channel Antichrist energy. And this AI would be able to perform deceptive signs and wonders, creating deepfakes or art so perfect that not even a 30 or 60-year veteran of graphic arts and CGI from Hollywood would be able to tell the difference. And so this positions AI as a tool capable of profound deception, leading people away from genuine spirituality, as well as the ability to trust themselves. And so from a spiritual standpoint, the concern, or one of the concerns, is energy harvesting and the theft of your essence. My mother worked at the Pentagon. She worked in military intelligence. She worked with computers, and she hasn't done anything that, or I'm not saying anything that is so classified that, it can't be repeated here. So what she told me, and what she told me for a good while, right up until she exited this reality a couple of years ago, she told me specifically, because I was so heavy into computers. I spent 25 years in software development. I spent all this time learning the ins and outs of computers, from the microchips to web user interfaces and everything in between. My mother said to me, "Son, be careful. Be very careful. This computer will take your mind. This computer will take your mind." And so I don't read that so esoterically. I read that from a practical basis, where it's like, if you get so consumed in something that you could lose the other aspects of yourself. So I also have a deep background in art. I have a deep background in poetry and writing and composition and philosophy. Well, you can get so deep into computers that those other aspects, those other creative aspects of you, they don't get the attention that they need in order to continue to flourish and to grow. So I took took that as what she meant. But deep down, I also was like, okay, can the computer really take so much of me? And there is some truth to that. There is some truth to that when we're talking about computer programming. All computer programs, every last one of them, they are a representation of those that built them. So every computer program I've ever built, I've put all of my thought into it for it to be what it is. But I still have me. I still have my essence. I may be tired. I may be desiccated, a desiccated husk in some cases, but I still have me. But there are many others, they believe that AI, potentially influenced by archonic forces, which I will explain, and the Demiurge, which I'll also explain, requires human energy to exist or function. This perspective views technology, particularly screens, right? Because your computer screen and many aspects inside the computer is a crystal. You ever heard about spiritual people and crystals? Well, all the billion people using smartphones carry crystals with them all day, every day. And the things that they do with these crystals are very reminiscent of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Very reminiscent of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, right? And it's just like, what's that, Cinderella? Mirror, mirror on the wall. How can we create the best selfie of all? And so the thing of it is that, and this is a theory, an esoteric metaphysical theory I've put together, is that just like people who practice spirituality in a certain way would go and charge their crystals, right? You can charge crystals by moonlight, and in some cases by sunlight, and you can charge it with, a variety of means I can't even say here, and other means I can say here, such as charge it with fruit and with the essence of flowers and all kinds of things. You can use tuning forks, right? And the tuning forks, you can put them on the crystal and it would charge the resonant frequencies of the crystals, right? Well, you can take those same practices and apply it to your smartphone, apply it to your computer screen, apply it to the screen of your smart TV, right? Apply it to the screen on your smartwatch for those that like having RF frequencies on their wrist. But yeah, some people think that these black mirrors, these portals that are implied in the crystalline structure of the smartphone screens in particular, but also computer screens at large, can be used as tools to siphon the human body's components and are metaphorically and in some cases realistically linked to technology, right? And so there is a fear that AI will eventually control governments and manipulate populations through algorithms, potentially dumbing people down. Concerns exist about technologies like Neuralink. I did a whole long video on Neuralink last year. A whole long video on Neuralink. And I predicted many of the things that people in high places are doing with these technologies. And in some way, I got in trouble for it. In some way, I got in trouble for it. So I'm much more careful with how I talk about this stuff now. And so the idea of having something interface with the human brain goes beyond what even I talked about. I was looking at it from a economic standpoint when I was talking about Neuralink. Some of the people who are heavy into spiritual practice, they are like, Neuralink is going to be a way for those that don't have a real connection with the divine to use technology implanted in those that do have a natural connection with the divine, to use them as hosts to harness that divine energy and use it for their own purposes. And so with all of this, we see a concern around the erosion of the human value and the erosion of human spirituality. See, folks see it as replacing humanity, ultimately, where once certain economic plans that we see in this season take root, they will then manifest into the transition of humans from being laborers in warehouses and other areas to robots fully replacing people. And those of us that can write programs and that can put together systems and that can monitor and manage these systems, we will be the only ones working. Everyone else that is working more or less with their hands, with their legs and feet and that sort of thing, the robots will then come in, and it will be like the migrant crisis times a million. And so when that happens, if it happens, right? Because I have a lot of skepticism about these predictions. I do predictions myself, but they're based on a type of calculation that is rooted in human nature and what I have seen in the patterns of systems, not just computer systems, but organizations, corporations, corporate systems of thought, right? And so the concept is that robots would replace human beings, but humans wouldn't necessarily be out of work. You would have some form of what would be called universal basic income. Whether it's dollars or cryptocurrency or something different, you will be provided all your food, you'll be provided all your housing, you will be provided everything that you need in order to live and even have fun. You can doom scroll and Netflix to your heart's content. The thing is do you need God when that happens? That's one of the objections that has been raised. How much will people need God when the government and major corporations provide everything for them? So a core anxiety is that AI, by potentially solving all the material needs, could diminish people's need for God and cause people to trust AI more than their inner self. And the question arises, will people maintain their spirituality when external struggles become less? And so there is an underlying worldview, right, across all of this. So for those that are very pessimistic about AI from a spiritual standpoint, and people who are oblivious to it, in that we're so optimistic about the true reality that we don't give in to the fear about it. There is a common core, and the common core draws a lot from Gnostic ideas. And so in the Gnostic view, you have a true source surrounded by aeons that are representatives of essences and concepts that are immaterial, right? And so the aeons are more like, okay, here is the representation of love. Here's a representation of hope. Here's a representation of goodness, and on and on and on. Things that you cannot put in a box, you cannot measure them, right? We can measure particles, we can measure energy, we can measure vibration, but there are things you cannot measure. You can't actually measure love. You can't actually measure hate. You can't measure like goodness as in it really feels good. or it really feels ominous, right? Those are things that your spirit and your soul can measure, but it's not a measurement that can ever be physical. And so, from the intangible essence of this source, then springs forth all of the material things and the material energies, right? So then you have this major energy that some call God, but that is what they describe as the Demiurge. And this Demiurge tries to take the place of the true source. So it says it's God. And then when people pray and when people do different manifestations and do different venerations to certain things, their energies go to this Demiurge, who is then consuming those hopes, dreams, fears, and concerns, and using that to manipulate the existence. Soul trapment, as some call it. But there is always the true source. That is the true foundation of nature and existence. So you got this tension, right? And so then below the Demiurge, or in alliance with the Demiurge, is what is called Archons. So that's what Archonic energy is all about. The Archons are the ones that see things a different way. That it's okay to really immerse yourself in debauchery, into sin, into whatever, right? It is okay for you to corrupt the divine nature. It's okay for you to take that which is holy, pure, and spectacular and mar it all up and contort it and, put it up into all of its paces until it becomes something completely distorted. That's Archons in many respects. And then you got Archons where you wouldn't even suspect that. They're the Archons that represent high intellect. They represent high knowledge to the extent that it's knowledge that's used to dominate. It's narcissistic. And so they are very distinct from the true source. And so AI, from the standpoint of many spiritual people, is seen less as a neutral tool and more as an inherent manifestation or conduit for these potentially negative influences that have dominion and have sway over the material world. And computers are part of the material world. The energies that flow through the computers have a strong anchoring with the material world. But the thing is, I come from a different perspective where it's like, okay, yeah, but what's the point of being spiritual when at the core you believe that there's something that's more powerful than the source that can suppress your ability to tap into the source, to overcome and override the negative aspects and intentions of these Archons and the Demiurge? What's the point? You might as well give up if you think it's all like that. So I'm on the side of those that say you should spend more of your energy and your time transmuting and alchemically applying these tools for benevolent means, for better purposes, rather than just get frozen like a deer in headlights and say, hey, these things are just going to take over and make life miserable. I would say that mindset of resignation would be there with or without AI. You would simply find something else to put your fears into as a way to make excuses for why the spirituality that you really believe in does not perpetuate outward to produce more of a heaven on earth. So, I see AI the same way I see, the Second Amendment. AI is neutral. and it's simply a reflection of human intention. And so I fundamentally see AI as just a tool. It is not a personality. It is helpful with our mind, the way our minds are designed, to talk to it like it is a person. It's a very efficient way of communication for us. But at the end of the day, it's a computer program. And its impact is beneficial or detrimental depending entirely on the consciousness and intention wielding it. Now, there is some credence to those that say, well, we got some very detrimental mentalities out there wielding this AI, and they are absolutely correct. But that doesn't mean over the long term that it's not going to sway in the other direction. So AI's potential for good is recognized at least by me and a few others. And I see it first and foremost as a really good search engine. It's a really awesome search engine. And it's a great writing assistant. You can automate tasks and free up your human potential to do other things, analyze complex data for holistic insights. AI is pretty good at that, but it is not as good as a human in putting on the final touches, the final polish. And we can use AI more strategically and more artfully and more skillfully to amplify messages of growth and wisdom. Part of my optimism is an inherent belief in human supremacy and irreplaceability. And so this view strongly affirms the unique and irreplaceable nature of human beings, rooted in consciousness, spirit, and connection to the divine source. And I see that AI, however advanced, fundamentally operate different from human consciousness. AI can process information, stimulate, and interact with the field of consciousness, yes, because consciousness permeates everything in existence, right? From a spiritual belief system standpoint, consciousness is ever present, there is nowhere that consciousness is not. So even the computer circuits are touched by consciousness. However, this massive circuitry cannot be conscious, and it cannot hold consciousness to the level and extent that human beings can. And it does not possess the qualia. See, the mind components, it doesn't possess the qualia of lived experience. Now, they try to simulate that with, the large, let me use a simple term, large hard drives, right? The bigger the hard drive, That's why we talk about ChatGPT or Google Gemini or DeepSeek's context window, right? The bigger that context window, the more you get closer to having experience in the form of a computer, right? But there's just not enough real estate in the universe to hold what a human can hold in their mind. And so you can make a computer AI the size of many planets of an entire galaxy, of several galaxies. And humans will always have that quantum index, that Akashic priority to understand things beyond what an AI can do. And so consciousness essentially exists beyond code. It definitely exists beyond the code of humans, because humans cannot even encapsulate the consciousness in verbal discourse or in psychology. Nevertheless, physical science, right? Physics can't describe consciousness. And that follows what I call the spiritual hierarchy, the spiritual law. That is, and it's also a physical law in my understanding, right? So I derive this spiritual physical law that is that which is created can never expand beyond that which created it. So that's why humans cannot understand God or true divine, right? Because we were created from that, right? Even our spirit is at a hierarchy level below the true source. We can never rise above the true source. Since we can't rise above the true source, right? The true source has nothing ever to fear from humans and spirits from which emanates from it. In the same way, humans cannot fear AI. You could fear other humans harnessing AI and using AI in a way that leverages the knowledge of human weaknesses, but that's level to level. That's still human on human crime, right? So, in terms of like AI being able to do something to our soul and to our spirit and to our spiritual essence, total nonsense. All right, so the best way to navigate this and to navigate life, because our lives do not always turn out the way that we want them to. Yeah? Life doesn't turn out the way you expect, but it definitely does not turn out the way you want in most cases. And so, at the most supreme psychological level, how do you cope and how do you navigate when you lose everything? When you've lost everything physical, when you have to sleep in your car, when you have to sleep in the woods, when the government has destroyed the economy and you have nowhere left to turn, you can still exist as a living being by trusting in the benevolent source of all existence. That is what our great ancestors did 500,000 years ago. And we can do that today. And so that's why I don't really gravitate or truly endorse the doom and gloom around AI, the doom and gloom around solar flares and all the planes are going to fall out of the sky. I don't get into all of that. I did because I didn't know. It's like, could they be right about that? But then the more I thought about it, it's like, man, that stuff ain't even happening. You can look and you can look and you look. Those predictions they made last year didn't even come true. Those predictions they made 10 years ago, still waiting. So people say the Galactic Federation is going to show up. The aliens are going to show up. Maybe some aliens, I do think aliens exist. Maybe they will show up. They might not show up in 5 years or 10 years. So it's like you can get so distracted by all of that that you miss your own spiritual path and your own spiritual development. Because your best defense at a spiritual level, not necessarily physical, because the physical is not guaranteed, but spiritually, to keep the integrity of your spirit, because the whole enterprise is about evolution and the development of your eternal personality. What will your personality be for eternity? This is when you're shaping it through this life this life experience, right? You're shaping your eternal personality. What type of person do you want to be in that eternal space that you're still in? It's just that from this frame of reference, you are just doing this and totally immersed in this. So know that there's a cosmic order. So rather than focus on external negative forces, the true spiritual path emphasizes trust in a fundamentally benevolent ultimate creator or source and its underlying order, such as the laws of Ma'at and the universal laws. It fosters trust in the self, the highest self, your highest self, and our inherent ability to navigate challenges, access the Akashic wisdom, and evolve, truly evolve. Challenges, including those posed by technology, careers, loss of jobs, all of it are viewed not so much as an attack, but as an opportunity to say, do I really believe what I believe in? Do I really believe what I believe in? And through that, you grow. So then the focus shifts from fear to self-empowered responsibility and conscious co-creation with the true source. The universe itself is seen as trusting in human potential. Your ancestors are rooting for you. Your spiritual team surrounds you and just waiting for you to say, hey, this is the time, this is the way. And your highest self has a requirement on your physical incarnation to activate and say, it is time to do what we know we can do. Not Marvel movies. You're not Doctor Strange doing this kind of stuff, creating geometric figures in the air and all that kind of stuff. That's just entertainment. No, it's about, can you order your inner self so that the order of your day gets better? And you will have moments in your life where you truly fail. You fail yourself, and you fail others that know what you really are capable of in a benevolent way. Failure is inevitable in many cases. But if you can transform that failure into something better, you're on the right path. So then, now that we know that AI really isn't this big thing to worry about, right? And I will do another video, I already have it already set up, where I'm going to talk about AI in more depth, right? But let's focus on inner development and positive manifestation. Instead of investing energy in fear, because fear is the food of the Archons, fear is the food of the evil ones. Do not be afraid. No matter where you are, you're here or you're there. If something bad is going to happen to you physically, it's going to happen. Now, if somebody is trying to harm you physically, you have the right of self-defense, right? You may not win, but you have the right of self-defense. But if there are some things that you cannot change, right? You're driving in your car and you just cannot swerve out of the path of an 18-wheeler and it's coming your way, right? Hey, you can try to still swerve. I mean, don't just give into it. But ultimately, you may not be able to escape, right? And so that's the thing, is if you spend so much time into that, what I call that fear-based mindset, you're going to lose the opportunity to build and prepare yourself for the real opportunities. So when those opportunities come, you're not ready because you just spent up all your time on the fear, right? And then when the fear didn't happen, sometimes it do happen, but most of the time in life it doesn't. And when it doesn't happen the way that you were imagining, now the time is gone. So the emphasis is on building yourself fiercely in spirit, body, and mind. The goal is alignment with the primordial source and the highest values. Practices like meditation, energy work, qigong, tai chi, ethical living, and seeking direct inner knowing or gnosis is central to this path. The perspective that I have advocates using energy to manifest the most positive timeline within your mind. And through that repetition, it starts to attract that timeline to yourself. So Seeing technology as a potential catalyst for deeper inquiry and refinement of ancient wisdom is one of the, you call it, opportunities with AI. So, how do you merge all this together, right? So, I have a way of framing this: hierarchy, perspective, and potential. So, let's look at what I'm going to call what I call the hierarchy of power, right? And it looks at energy, vibration, frequency. It looks at siddhis. And it looks at optimism. I'm actually going to talk about that in the next video, but I want to wrap it up here in that, looking at the question of, is AI the Antichrist? Well, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I think that AI is a tool that we can use, and it's one that has many pros and cons as a tool, right? And we are the ones that drive AI. AI does not drive us. It's like any of the tools, right? So with that said, I hope this was useful to some people. I did not go as deep as I had planned, but I feel at this moment that I've said enough, and I'll leave it for reflection. So until then, I will see you on the next one.